Welcome to the Hangardeck Podcast. We bring amazing aviation talk and interviews for the aviation enthusiast. You are listening to www.thehangardeck.com with host Pitchlock Pete and the Hangardeck crew. This show is brought to you by Leading Edge Aviation Consultants. Pre-flight is complete and the crew is strapping in. Stand by for Pitchlock Pete and the Hangardeck team at the Hangardeck Podcast. Welcome to this episode of the Hangardeck Podcast.
Hey, welcome to this episode of the Hangardeck. Pitchlock Pete back in the studio again after, it's a COVID sabbatical. I would say it's a COVID sabbatical. That's my excuse tonight. We're live, and thanks for tuning in. We've been advertising this event for the last couple of weeks for a very special group that reached out to us at the Hangardeck. The F-14 Association gave me a call. It was like in the middle of the night a couple of weeks ago. I picked the call up, and it was like, hey, we're interested in talking to you guys about talking about the F-14. And I said, I'm interested. Let's hear it. Long story short, a couple weeks later, I've got this whole group of awesome veterans in the studio with me tonight. We're going to kick off the 50th anniversary of the F-14 with a real bang. In the studio, I've got three F-14 veterans, and I'm not gonna introduce them by name. They're gonna introduce themselves. I know very much about them. They've been part of my life over the last couple of years, and some old and some new friends here. But hey, Joe, what's going on?
Yeah, great. Glad to be here, Pete.
Welcome to the Hangardeck.
Great.
So can you tell? I know we got a lot of lights in the studio, and it's we've got the air on, but the heat's climbing. That's because you guys are hot, man. You guys are hot. So hey, Joe, tell our audience a little bit about yourself and your awesome background.
I'm Dave Parsons, more commonly known as Hey Joe in the Tomcat community. We can talk later about how I got my call sign, but I've got over 2,000 hours in the Tomcat. It's the only thing I flew in the Navy. I actually joined the Marine Corps in hopes of flying the Tomcat, and when the Marine Corps bailed out on the program, I had to switch over to the Navy, and finally got there, and that's what I flew in several different squadrons. And I'm glad Pete is having us in here because we want to kick off the 50th anniversary of the first flight with a series of interviews. You may be starting with us, but there's plenty more to follow, and we're going to do this for a whole year. Wow,
that's awesome. I guess we're going to have to get used to you, huh?
That's right.
But to your right, to your right, Mr. Pete Williams. How are you, Pete?
I'm great, Pete. Thanks. Pete Williams. Call sign is Caps. I've had about a 25, 30-year association with the Tomcat, and I'm honored to be able to come here today and give homage to the Tomcat. My background, transition to Tomcats, started in Phantoms and desperately wanted to get into the Tomcat. Managed to transition with VF-31, went over as a squadron in 1980, and then I had a series of different tours, VF-31, VF-101, VF-31, VF-143, had command of that, then went on to be air boss at the Enterprise. Then I jumped into the acquisition world and had the opportunity to be the Tomcat class desk and the Tomcat program manager. So been on both sides of the fence, and as I said, I'm honored to be able to pay homage because it is such a fantastic aircraft. And I know we're going to get into that and talk about it more. But
Yeah.
thanks for the opportunity.
No, Caps, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What a distinguished career. Thanks for being on our show, and I'm sure it's going to be a great episode and a great Hangardeck relationship with the F-14 Association as we move forward. But I want to move over to the E-Dog in the room, the man with the plan, Mr. Nick Kessel. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Hey, thanks, Pete. It's great to be here. I am representing the maintainers. I joined the Navy in the early 90s and as an avionics technician, and immediately got sent to working on P3s. So coming out of school, we didn't have choice on where we're going to go. So I did my tour, did it well, and called the detailer up, and I had a set of F-14 orders that I wanted to take. And the detailer told me to get my chief on the phone because he couldn't believe what he was hearing. He told my chief, said, I can't even pay people to take these billets, and this guy's calling me up wanting to take it. Well, you tell him he's getting it. And so a couple months later, I ended up in VF-31, F-14Ds. Did a little more than 4 years in 31. Left 31 and went and taught F-14 maintenance. Came back to Tomcats, VF-213. Did the last Tomcat cruise, and then it was Hornets by mandate after that. So I rode her to the very end. But again, it's great to be here. Got a lot of great stories, and looking forward to hearing some more around here too. So thank you very much.
That's awesome, and I got to say, welcome all three of you to the show. What you're not seeing behind the scenes is, of course, Whitey is here with me again. He's operating cameras back there, but we're going to bring him back to the mic here very soon. My association with F-14s is very minimal, very, very minimal. In fact, I talked to Hey Joe about it the other night. I was a rescue swimmer when I first came in and was able to have the fortunate experience of jumping in as a rescue swimmer down in Key West, Florida, to do that job down there with for VF-101 and VF-201. So that was my experience with the F-14, meeting some of those guys. But we're going to get into it. So what the curious part of me on the anniversary of the F-14, it's lost. The airplane flew for a better part of 50 years for the U.S. Navy. It was a workhorse intercept fighter. I'll just throw it out to the panel here. How many variations of the F-14 existed in its day? And, can you elaborate a little bit about its progression to its final stages? And I'll Caps,
Yeah.
feel free.
Sure. Yeah, I'll take it on first. So the first one, obviously, the F-14A, had the AWG-9 radar and Pratt & Whitney TF-30 engines. Originally, they wanted to put a General Electric engine in, but in order to get it through Congress, they had to appease, I think it was the congressman or senator from Connecticut, where Pratt & Whitney was located, so put the TF-30s in, and that's obviously a bit of a long story with the problems that we had with the engine. But we did end up replacing those with the F-110s, General Electric, and that resulted in the F-14B. That came along, I think, around the late 90s, 97, 98, when I got back to NavAir. They were doing the testing on that. And so the F-14B had the AWG-9 radar, but at some point we had an upgrade program and added, I think, a whopping 96K to the computer, and maybe a bit more at the end of it. But and that was one of the advantages of that airplane, because it was quasi-digital, it was analog, and we can talk about that more later. But it allowed us to do a lot at the later stages, adding things onto the Tomcat that you just can't do to the Hornet. And then my first tour at NavAir was a deputy assistant program manager for systems engineering in that was 88 to 91, and we were developing the F-14D. And the story on the F-14D is it was a package deal that John Lehman put together with Grumman back then. And there was supposed to be the A6F and the F-14D. And Lehman got directly involved. And he said, okay, you're going to do a firm fixed price for $1 billion for each aircraft. Well, the A6F got canceled. The F-14 continued on. And so, because it was $1 billion, it wasn't a completely new aircraft. The F-14D, the third variant and the last variant that we had the 110 engines, but it had a new distributed digital system, and they had the APG-71, a new digital radar. So a lot more capability. Never quite realized its potential because we only spent $1 billion. As an example, the Strike Eagle, they spent $3 billion.
Oh, wow.
So,
Yeah.
and we used to get a lot of complaints from the fleet. Hey, why don't we have, the hand controllers and back side by side? Well, the reason is we only could spend a certain amount of money, but still tremendous aircraft.
So it still maintained that capability that
Yeah.
the requirements officers had set out, but
Right.
not all the bells and whistles that the F-15 had.
Right.
So my Caps, that's great. Nick, did you have experience with the system he just described in the last deployment or subsequent?
With the F-14D, absolutely. That was my bread and butter the whole time. It was a bridge. I believe it was a generation 4.5. It wasn't quite integrated software-driven aircraft, but it had a lot of interconnectivity between the systems that the A didn't have and the B kind of did. And as a maintainer, we loved it. The pilots loved it, and the Rios too, Dave. But there was still a lot of commonality, even with the earlier aircraft as well. In the APG-71 system, half of the system was interchangeable with the A and the B on the radar transmitter side, and we were brand new, cutting edge technology. But I will say that the radar antenna we had in the APG-71 had a whopping 8088 processor in it. I think. The Atari 2600 could outprocess that thing, but we were flying that thing into the mid aughts. So, but yeah, and particularly when we became a mud mover towards the end of the program and did the air to ground work, really, that's where that potential was in the future, that we could have taken it, further than just laser guided bombs and the initial set of JDAMs. But what a great aircraft!
Nice. Hey, Joe, what are the platforms or the model types that you're most familiar with throughout your very lengthy career?
I flew the A in all my operational assignments. I got a chance to finally fly the B in the F-101, which I remember very distinctly because I was so looking forward to it. And we got up there, and there's certain things, since I'm a Rio, certain things that Rio does when you run up and when you are cleared to take off, you call off the peg, make sure that your airspeed indicator is working, and you call 100 knots for the pilot to know about nose wheel steering, and then when you're airborne, make a radio call. That airplane took off so fast, and I was like, holy, I won't say what I said next. And
Oh, you could say it, dude.
holy shit. And I didn't make a single call, and we were like, it was just a rocket ship. And,
Yeah.
I don't know what your feeling was like first time you got in with the big motors.
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah. So I liken it to a 1960s era muscle car, like a GTO.
Yeah.
It was just raw power, And I remember one time, and I'm at Rio as well, in the back seat down over Fentress burning down. We had too much gas before we go in and do an FCLP, and so we just lit the burners, and it just threw you right back in the seat. It was so impressive. Now, fast forward, I think one of my final flights in the Navy was in a Super Hornet, and you stroke the blowers on that, and it's kind of like dun, da, 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 much different.
So it takes time for you to get that momentum.
Yeah.
No, but an F-14 in instantaneous snap yourself back in the seat. That's awesome. Wonderful. So the most memorable moment in your careers, and we'll go Dave, you first. If you could tell us one of the most memorable times in the F-14 that you hold dear and near to your heart.
I've got to say, the whole experience, I never manned up a jet, maybe not for spares or alerts, but I never had a single time I walked either on a ship or ashore that I didn't thank my lucky stars I was there, that I was so privileged to be part of this community. I took my camera every time, even if I knew the weather was crappy, I'd take my camera, because you never know, when you punch through the clouds, there might
Be that photo opportunity there.
So
we're going to get into that too. Dave is an author of 9 books that Dave has put out, a couple of great F-14 novels that we'll talk about. But I'm sorry, continue.
So I did have a great mission when we first arrived in the Indian Ocean, and I was having this. I just don't write. I'm an avid reader. That got me into writing, and I always had aviation books, reference books, and magazines with me on the ship. And we were going to go to the Indian Ocean, and we are going to go up, and it was basically, I don't think we had a name for it, but we called it a fire watch on Iran. We were up there making sure they knew we were there in the North Arabian Sea, and that was before the carriers went up to the Persian Gulf. But if they flew anything out, we would intercept it just to let them know we were there. And our quote-unquote spy, the ensign that was scared to death of the fighter ready room, somebody told him at spy school, which the Air Force runs, that if you went to a Tomcat squadron, you just would be ridiculed, and they would never take anything seriously, and and
Right.
it's kind of partly true, but we did take that part seriously. And he was trying to brief us on what was operating out of Iran, and one of the things was a P3 that would come out every morning, and all he had was the classic black and white pictures. And somebody asked him, "So what color is that?" And he looks at it and he goes, "Oh, desert tan, of course." And I said, "I beg to differ. I've got a magazine in my stateroom that shows it's different shades of blue." And he looked at me in horror and said, "That's hearsay." It was like, he was a puritanical preacher, and I'd said the wrong thing in church. He says, "They told us you should never believe anything you read in a magazine." And I said, "Well, it's a picture from Lockheed as they were delivering the aircraft. I have a feeling they haven't painted it again." And I bet it's blue. And he just was so horrified, and I think he would have burned the magazine if he saw it. And was their enthusiast. It was a very credible magazine. And I ate that stuff up. I had a bunch of them. And so it just happened that the next day, I'm with Chuck Hunter, Bug Hunter, and we're in alert. And the deal was that the first Tomcat to arrive on the P3 was supposed to get out on its wing and get underneath it, make sure there's no weapons on it, and just check them out. And the other one was supposed to stay up at 5,000 feet and monitor, because the P3 was down there looking at all the shipping traffic, so it's down low, rigging the ships. And there was really bad sort of foggy weather, so it was pretty low. And the other Tomcat in trail was supposed to watch in case they launched a fighter, a Tomcat or a Phantom. And so I knew I had to get down there close, because I was going to take a picture to prove that thing was blue. And so we're sitting in the alert. I got my camera, and the problem was sometimes the alerts are stuffed on the side, nowhere near the catapult. Sometimes they spot you on the catapult. And in this case they did. In our sister squadron, or Brand X, VF-33 was on the cat. So there's no way we were going to be first off unless they went down. So, but they didn't, and they launched. And the VF-33 pilot, I just happened to look to see who was sitting in the alert, was a guy that I went through the RAG with. There was actually a helicopter pilot that did well in helicopters, and he wanted to be a Tomcat guy. So at that time, they weren't taking nuggets early on into fresh out of flight school in the Tomcat community. Guys were coming over from the F-3s, like Tony Reed. A lot of, so this guy was in there, but he was kind of, very hesitant, followed all the rules, not like your average Tomcat guy. So
No, I want to hear more about that later.
yeah, that became very important. So they call away the alert, and we're like, hot dog, and they launch, we launch, and they've got a head start on us because we had to follow them off the cat. And the beauty, and I'd like at some point what you thought of the Tomcat after being in the Phantom, but most of the guys in my squadron, I joined 102 when it transitioned, so half the squadron stayed over for that. And the Phantom guys were just, especially the Rios, were just in love with that radar and the big picture that you had, and you could actually depict, you could use waypoints and velocity vectors to actually put lines to, if you knew you were going to go into bad guy territory, there was some kind of restriction, you could have your routes, you could get kind of artful with that. So we were told to avoid, not to go closer to 50 miles to Oman, that there was a buffer zone that you didn't want to make them mad. And so, and it stuck out. And the P-3 was on the other side of that. And because I picked them up right away in the radar. It's just marvelous radar. It's just whenever they, it was better than the U-2. The U-2 would say something, or we'd pick it up before they did. And so, and I said, gee, he's honoring this arbitrary buffer that we imposed. It's not what the Omanis imposed. And I said, you know, if you're not cheating, you're not trying hard enough. And I said, we can just go VFR direct. And no one's going to, if they don't like it, they'll say something. Nobody said a word. And so we cut the corner and went straight for the P-3. And I knew, because it was so foggy, that they would never see us pass them, because they'd be focusing straight ahead. And here we are cutting ahead of them. And I could tell that they were really chapped when all of a sudden we reported that we had joined on a blue P-3. And of course I got up and kept the pictures. And then I called them up the radio, and I said, on the VF-33 guys, and said, hey, you want to come down? We'll get your picture. And this guy was like, no, you know, and they were pissed. And they, you know, he was mad. He confronted me later, like, you know, you weren't supposed to do that. And I went, really? Let's go talk to your skipper. And he just backed off, you know.
That's awesome.
But, that was cool, and it was definitely blue. I got a great picture of it.
Awesome.
And we could probably run that later, add it in.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll add it in later. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. We're going to take a break for our sponsor, Aviator Hotline Magazine, and we will be right back at the Hangar Deck.